Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Dana and this is Delighted to DIY. For this first DIY, we're going to take some burnt umber acrylic paint and a little bit of water to water it down to make a stain, and we're going to stain 15 of these old-fashioned type clothespins that I found at Michael's. After they were all dried, we'll start assembling them. We're going to use a popsicle stick, stain it as well, and hot glue it to 5 of the clothespins in kind of a angled upward motion or design. Then we're going to take 4 of the clothespins, glue them onto that popsicle stick after dry fitting them, and then we're going to continue this until we are at the top. So the next layer will have 3, and the row after that 2, and then 1 at the very top. For this next part, I didn't have enough clothespins to do an entire second tree, so I had to mix and match. However, I would suggest just using the same ones if possible. So I used some of the clothespins from Dollar Tree and took them apart, taking the metal pieces out, then hot gluing them back together. I did this for all of them, and if you are making a second smaller tree, you will need 10 to make this one. After staining them with some burnt umber and water, we're going to assemble them in the same fashion as the first one. So this time though, because it's slightly smaller, we're starting with 4 clothespins on the bottom, then using a piece of popsicle stick to hold the next 3 for the next layer up. Then because the popsicle stick only covered the first 2, the outer 2 on the bottom layer, as you see right now, weren't attached to anything, so I had to do a second popsicle stick along the backs of all 4 of the first row. Then I continue on in the same fashion, working my way up with a popsicle stick on top of the 3, adding 2 clothespins to it, then adding the last clothespin on top of the 2 that we just put on. Today's video is part of an open playlist hosted by 2 very talented ladies. One is Sonja from Domestic Diva DIY, and the other is Sandra from DIY at the Schwowin's Nest. I will have a link to both their channels in my description box, as well as a link to the playlist to check out some other awesome creators and what they've created for this Christmas in July DIY playlist.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2
With the trees assembled, we're going to take some white paint. I used the Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white, and I'm going to dry brush on the tops of the clothespins, working my way down to make it sort of look like it has a faux snowed fallen on it look effect, if that makes sense. Using 2 mouse traps from Dollar Tree, we're going to create the bases. So we're going to remove all the metal pieces, as you saw in the first one. Here I am just taking them apart, a little wiggling and finagling, and you can do it. Then with a screwdriver, I just put it under the pieces that were lodged into the wood to kind of pry them out. So that was the 2 on the sides and the 1 at the front. After these were all removed, I took off the stickers. With the stickers removed, I'm just showing you that the holes on one side were larger than the holes on the opposite side. So we're going to use the holes with the smaller side to be our good side. If the holes bother you in any way, by all means, fill them in with wood filler or some spackling or putty, and then sand it down. Again, with some burnt umber acrylic paint and some water, we're going to faux stain the the mouse traps on the tops and sides. I didn't bother doing the bottom, but again, if this bothers you or if you want a more finished look, by all means do the bottoms as well. Next, I'm measuring for center because we're going to drill a hole for a dowel. Word of advice, drill slowly as you don't want to go all the way through, so drill in little increments. Next, we'll want to measure off the height we need for each support. I'm using dowels from Dollartree and just holding it and marking. Then outside in my garage, I'll use my handsaw and miter box to cut off the ends that weren't needed. And here I am sanding it. Then with some glue, hot glue, we're going to attach the dowels to the backs of the trees. And to add some extra stability and strength, I just glue on some twine. I did this in a couple of places on the big one, as you see here, on the big tree, sorry.
Christmas, my true love gave to me 5 golden rings, 4 golden birds, 3 French hens.
With some Gorilla Wood glue, I'm going to put it in around the hole we drilled, as well as a little dab of hot glue for an instant hold to hold the dowel with the Christmas tree in place. Then with some 3-in-1 advanced craft glue from Beacon, I put it along the edge and then spread it out with a small paintbrush, and then added some sand granules that I got from Dollarama. I think salt would work just as well, or well, maybe Epsom salt because it's a little bit larger, to give it the base a snowed look. I did this on most of the base just till I was content, as well as the fronts and the backs. And then I used the glue again to kind of give the painted snow look a more 3D effect by adding some more of the white sand granules onto places along the tops of the clothespins.
2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree.
Make sure you stick around till DIY number 3, as I'm giving you some craft tips you won't want to miss. With some adhesive cork that I found at Dollar Tree, I begun by measuring out 6.5 inches with my ruler. I marked this along in different spots, then just used my ruler to connect all of them and cut this out. Then once this sheet was cut off, I freehanded, I think it's a trapezoid shape. I freehanded the shape that you see here, then cut it out, and then use this piece to make a slightly smaller shape. I did this 6 times, I believe. However, the 6th one is a triangle. We're going to make a Christmas tree. Because the cork is very thin, I stuck each one onto each piece we've made onto a piece of cardboard and then cut them out.
On the 6th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 6 keys of lane, 5 golden rings, 4 golden birds.
With one of these frames from Dollar Tree, begin by taking off the plastic and taking it all apart. I also you'll want to pull off the foam embellishments. Then with a scrapbook piece of paper from Michaels, it was a faux wood shiplap look. I traced out the backing of the frame onto it and then cut this out. Then we are going to adhere this onto the front side of the back of the frame using Mod Podge and a bit of water. Give it a good layer. And then I also like to wet or dampen the paper on the back with some water and whatever the leftover Mod Podge is on the brush. Then I place this on and smooth it out. To remove any of the edges, I just use the sanding block from Dollar Tree to sand off any of the remaining edges, and this gives you a really clean look. Then I dry fit the cork pieces onto the board to make sure where I want them, and then marked kind of above and below the first one before hot gluing it in place to know where I was going to put it. Then I did the same thing while I kept moving up. I just kind of marked the top and put some hot glue on the piece before it and the top of the piece that you are gluing on, and then kept working my way up. I hope this makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Then with the frame, I wanted to kind of just farmhouse it up a little bit more. So I dry brushed some chalk paint, white chalk paint on it, and then went back and very lightly dry brushed with some acrylic burnt umber. If you get too much, don't worry, you can always go back over it with some white paint. After all this paint, it's not permanent. You can always fix it up. I also dry brushed with some burnt umber just along the bottoms of the tree just to give it some more dimension. Then glued the tree onto the center of the backing of the frame. Then went to town decorating it. I used two of these faux spruce greenery pieces that I had from last year from Dollar Tree. They're already kind of flocked with some white flakes. And then I used some of this decorative vase filler that I found at Dollar Tree, and I actually found it few months ago, but of course picked up a whole bunch because it reminds me very much of Christmas. So yeah, I picked mine up to put away, but I start embellishing the corner with different pieces from this vase filler and then also some little things that I had in my stash. Then I took one of these red truck Christmas tree ornaments. I scuffed it up with my sanding block just to get rid of the glitter and kind of make it a little more rustic, then hot glued it onto the corner of the frame, and that was it. I hope you like DIY number 2. You'll have to let me know what you think and which one's your favorite in the comments below. For the third DIY, we're going to take two of these Valentine signs that I've already taken apart, and actually my daughter was beginning to DIY, but again, didn't finish it, so I'm going to repurpose them. We're going to put them together using popsicle sticks and hot glue. I added 5 for stability along the backs. Then with some wood filler, I filled in the join so that it'd be less noticeable. Once this stuff dries, it's white and you're good to go, so I sanded it down with my Dollar Tree sponge or sanding block. Then I gave it 2 good coats of the Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white, letting it dry between coats. After this was dry, I also went around the sides. After this was dry, I went on to my lettering. Now I'm showing you very quickly, this is how I began doing it. I was using these stickers and painted them as I had heard YouTubers do this, but this is what it looked like after a few coats. I wasn't impressed, so I went to my computer and created a printable that I printed onto tissue paper, then trimmed it down to size and dry fitted it onto the sign to make sure that it would fit and it was straight and even. Then we are going to Mod Podge it on. However, here's where the good tips of the day come in. I struggled a whole bunch. And I mean a whole bunch. So as per usual, I put my layer of Mod Podge with a little bit of water down, then struggled to get the positioning. And if you lift it too many times, it will begin to rip. So you don't want to do that, but I tried as many times as possible. Then I lightly patted and then went to do my top layer of Mod Podge and complete and utter smudging of the ink. So now on to the word claws. I thought I would try, I did all the same steps. However, I thought I'd kind of dab on with a foam brush the Mod Podge on the top layer and then smooth out with my regular brush along the edges. I still had ink bleeding. So next tip to help with the alignment, I finally realized that I would align it and then tape it onto the back. So I just flipped up the piece, put my layer of Mod Podge, then lightly tapped it down. Once it was in place, tap, don't rub. And then I very lightly, I dried in between. I think that is tip number 3. I dried in between, then Mod Podged on top, and I had a lot less. So here I'm showing you kind of between the N and the T and all around the N is some of the, where it bled the most. The word claws has a little less. There is still some. And then the word lane, almost perfect, I would say. So those are my tips when you are putting printed tissue paper onto a project. I sanded off any of the remaining tissue paper around the edges. Then to finish it off, I took my sponge brush and some bright red acrylic paint and went around the edges, giving it kind of a faux enameled look. Here, I think messier the better sort of thing. And that was it. If you like this video, why don't you give it a big thumbs up? It really helps me out. And if you want to see more of my creations, why don't you check out one of these videos? And as always, if you like what you saw and you want to see more thrift flips, budget home decor, and DIYs, why don't you consider subscribing and joining my creative family? Thanks for watching. Bye.